Hello, I'm Richard Bryant, Executive Director of Musco Center for the Arts at Chapman University here in Orange, California. It is my pleasure to welcome you to At the Musco, a free, interactive online series that showcases the best in performance, production, and arts education here at Chapman in a celebration of what we call the art of community. Our At the Musco series is all about bringing fresh perspectives to our audiences. Tonight, we welcome a talented singer-songwriter whose work is informed by a unique intersection of identities. Gina Chavez is a pop artist who identifies as multi-ethnic, queer, Latinx, and Catholic. She spoke about her music and her experiences earlier today with students in a discussion panel at Chapman's University Cross-Cultural Center. Gina's personality shines through her music. She delivers unflinching empowerment through anthems that merge North American pop music and Latin genres such as cumbia, reggaeton, and folk. We're lucky to be able to get to know this unique artist tonight, and we invite you to listen to the voice, as NPR says, that stops you in your tracks. And now, here's your host, Laura Bustamante.
Welcome to At the Musco Online. My name is Laura, and I will be your host tonight, and we have a very special guest with us. We have Gina Chavez joining us. Now, Gina Chavez is a pop artist, although when they say pop artist, and I listen to your music, and I'm thinking she's so much more than a pop artist. I know she's a bilingual songwriter who mixes pop, North American pop with Latin genres, including cumbia, reggaeton, folk, and also you're an outspoken voice for women everywhere, which, I mean, very appropriately for this month, Women's History Month. But Gina, can you kick us off with a song first?
Ooh, we're going for it.
Is that a lot to ask for here?
We're going for it. I like
it. Go
for
it.
Of course. I'm very excited to be here, and what a beautiful space, and thank you all so much for tuning in. So this is one of my favorite songs I've ever written. It's called The Sweet Sound of Your Name, and it's a song that I wrote for my now wife, but we may get into this story a little later, but I wrote this at a time when as a Catholic, I had really kind of fallen in love for the first time and thought, wow, here's this person that completely lights up my world, and yet I can't have her because we're Catholic and clearly we can't be together. They say I'll forget you long enough to raise my head and push back up. They say I'll find someone a little less rough to touch my heart again with sweet, sweet love. Oh, no importa la herida, no importa el dolor, la dulce canción de tu nombre envuelve mi corazón. No matter the hurt, no matter the pain, my heart is wrapped around the sweet sound of your name. I hope you'll agree with me someday that you deserve life's loveliest things, smiles and warmth and restful springs were made for you, and you were made for me. Oh, oh. Dulce canción de tu nombre envuelve mi corazón. No matter the hurt, no matter the pain, my heart is wrapped around the sweet sound of your name. Comes over me like a million drops of rain. I'm fighting hard to see through the eye of this pain. Like earth broken from years of drought, I'm helplessly wide open now. I pray the sun convince the clouds, calm the storm and leave me the sound. Whoa, oh, oh, oh. I've been under lock and key for so long. You are the song of songs, untelling me from all my wrongs. No importa el dolor, la dulce canción de tu nombre envuelve mi corazón. No matter the hurt, no matter the pain, my heart is wrapped around the sweet sound. No importa la herida, no importa el dolor, la dulce canción de tu nombre mueve mi corazón. No matter the hurt, no matter the pain, my heart is wrapped around the sweet sound of your name.
Oh my gosh, Gina. Oh my gosh, you totally made me cry. I was just thinking right now about when you were on NPR's Tiny Desk, and a quote that they said about you. They said, if you're not familiar with Gina Chavez's work, we dare you to listen to her and not become a total fan. So, I mean, just hearing your music, like when I was listening to La Quemanda and Uprooted, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a total fan right now. I fell in love all over again.
Well, thank
so,
you.
Tell your wife I'm sorry. I'm falling in love just with your music. But speaking about your wife, I mean, I know there's so much to talk about you with your music and the process and all the awards and just the intersectionality, just so many things. But I do want to start with talking about what the theme is of this song, of your coming out story and your wife, because it's so beautiful and you could just hear it in the music.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so it's definitely a long story, but essentially, you know, I was cradle Catholic and really fell in love with my faith. When I was in high school, I had like really cool, you know, clergy members, and also I had a friend who actually entered the Brotherhood, and I was honestly, it's funny, I was definitely considering like being religious at some point, which is so funny to think about now. But you know, I was very connected to my faith, and so that was such a huge part of my life. My wife and we actually met at the University Catholic Center at the University of Texas. So we both went to UT. I was a journalism major. She was a psychology major. And we met during this retreat. If people are familiar with like a chrysalis retreat, there's, you know, like the college wild version of that. That's like a 3-day offsite, you know, whole thing. We prepared for 6 months to put this retreat on. And so I would do this retreat every year. And that was actually where Jody and I met. And, you know, without getting too into the details, you know, essentially like I had always had the experience throughout my life of like becoming infatuated with a girlfriend, but it was never, for me, it was never sexual. It was always just like, oh, I just always wanted to be around Laura. Like, and I just, you know, whatever. I would always want to be around that person until I like was around them too much, and then I would get like annoyed with them, and it would, yeah, right. And so I think
until Jody came
right
along.
Until Jody came along. And so I had 2 relationships in college, both with men, and they were great, like very healthy, wonderful relationships. The last guy I dated was like everything everybody would ever want on paper and more. It's like we went dancing and he gave me massages and he cooked and like it was all the things, right? And we had a blast together, but trying to love him felt like trying to push start a train. And trying not to love Jody felt like trying to stop one. And both are relatively impossible, but I couldn't stop that train. And I tried. You know, I tried to like pray my own gay away, and even just kind of coming to terms with the fact that I was a lesbian was a whole thing. Like I didn't understand that that's what was happening. I didn't understand that I was in love. And I was a kid that would listen to love songs growing up, and I would always get so like bored of like slow love songs because I was just like, "Ugh, this is cheesy. Like, who feels this way about anyone?" Right. But I now realize that I'm like, wow, I spent 24 years of my life not understanding how my heart worked because it wasn't an option. It wasn't an option for me to be gay because you just knew, right? You just knew, like, you can't be gay.
Until
Yeah.
So what gave you that permission to allow that train to keep going?
Boom. I think, it's obviously a lot of factors, but I think for me, the really blessed part of my story is that I did have two clergy, people from within the church that very much helped me come to terms with who I am. And so one of them was Sister Sharon. She was a daughter of Charity, who are just some of the most like beautiful people. Daughters of Charity is an order of religious. And I was going to spiritual direction with her. I literally think I only went to spiritual direction maybe twice, and it's essentially like counseling, but with a nun. And so, I don't even remember exactly what I was telling her, but probably something about like, I always want to hang around with this girl, Jody. I don't know what that is about. It's something I've experienced before, but I don't want it. I don't get it. I don't know what it is. And she said, Gina, have you discerned your sexuality? And the first time she asked me, I was like, yeah, I don't, whatever. The second time she asked me, I was like, what does that mean? The third time she asked me, I was like, a Catholic nun is asking me to discern my sexuality. Like, what is that, And I was like, am I gay? Like, what are we talking about? And she just, no judgment, said, you need to talk to God about who you are and how you're made and who you love. And I was just like,
that was a shocker.
Yeah, I was just
to come
like,
from a clergy.
Yeah, I was just like, what does that even mean? But I see so much grace in how she handled that, because it wasn't like I didn't feel judged. It was more just like, okay, wake up call. Like, let's do experiments and talk to God. And like, what does that mean? So, and I think once I finally like understood, I guess at this point I probably, it was more of like an infatuation. And so it's like when you're infatuated with somebody or you're in love with them, like you think about them all the time, right? And so I did this thing where I was like, all right, anytime I think about her, I'm gonna like stiff arm it and be like, God, what is it? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it love? Is it lust? Like, talk to me. And after doing that for like 3 months, which was exhausting, I finally just like one unimportant day, I was just like, oh, I'm in love. This is my heart working, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's good.
And so when did the song come along?
Yeah, well, way later. I think the hard part about our relationship is like, we couldn't really be in a relationship. All our friends were Catholic. We couldn't tell our families. You couldn't talk to, priests or like your youth group people. Like there was no one to talk to. So we were in essentially like a very unhealthy, like behind closed doors relationship. But it's not like we dated. We couldn't talk about it. We didn't want to be gay. We knew we couldn't be together. So that was kind of where this song came from, was once we kind of entered into, something that was like physical, but then we didn't talk about it. It was just not healthy, and that was really hard because we didn't have any support. So it's like, oh, okay, from God, I was like, oh, cool. I'm cool. Like, I'm gay, and that's actually, it's okay. And I came out to me. I came out to God. Mm-hmm. But then there's no structure for support there, and I'm so glad that on some level, I'm really glad that I discovered that at 24 instead of discovering it when I was 15, and not having to go through school. Like,
oh, I see.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would be so much harder as a teenager to have to deal with the lack of support.
Right. Or being judged or whatever, and I was like clueless about myself. So on some level, it's like that was a blessing. But then it's also really sad to be like, wow, it took me 24 years to like figure out how my heart worked. Mm-hmm. Like how that's hard, And I hope that like, I hope that those things are changing, right? That we're starting to have these conversations, that we have more of a vernacular for it. We're talking about identity, So I think all of that is really heartening, but especially our church structures, there's a lot of work left to do.
And where does music come in this way of communicating where we're headed? I mean, there's like a sort of social justice to it, right? In what you play. but then again, it's also very universal.
Right.
But back to when you were talking about the Catholicism and being gay, and then you're also Latinx, and there's just all these what they call intersectionalities, right?
Right.
And I was hearing that you're referred to as a missionary of intersectionality.
Ooh,
right?
I haven't heard that before.
Missionary of intersectionality. So what does that mean to you as far as the way you walk through life with all these intersections of cultures, and also how it influences your music?
Yeah. I mean, I like the word intersectionality. I think for me, I also just think about every one of us is so multifaceted. You know, the idea that like any one of us could fit nicely into a box is kind of laughable, right? It's just like there's so many different parts of our hearts and how we, you know, the ways in which we, you know, how we think and operate in the world. It's like my wife and I, like we have the same values, and it took me like 10 years to understand, because I always thought we were so similar because we have like very similar values, and like even things we like to do is very similar, but we are so different. Oh my God. We're like polar opposites. And it took me like 10 years to be like, oh wow, like we're really different, you know? And it's that idea that, you know, opposites attract. But I don't know. I think, yes, there's a lot of intersectionalities there, but I think we all have that, right? Like we all have a really important story to tell. And sometimes I think the thing I don't like about even just the idea of intersectionalities is that like a lot of times when I'm like, oh, I'm queer and I'm Catholic and I'm Latinx, and it's like, it's a lot of labels. And it's like, even those can be very limiting, which I don't love, right? But I think it's important, especially in a world where we're starting to wrestle with the, you know, white dominance in our structures and in our culture. You know, we're starting to wrestle with the effects of, you know, the patriarchy and all of those things, and hopefully starting to have some vocabulary around that. But we don't have a lot of resilience around those conversations. We don't have a lot of practice. And so they can be very hard. And so I think there's a lot of muscles that need to be built. And so I do think that things like intersectionality can be really helpful as we start to build those muscles. And just as music, I think music and art, the beautiful thing about it is that it can enter someone's heart in a way that a conversation cannot.
Exactly.
You know, if I say white dominance, like a lot of people will just shut down, and then suddenly it becomes like an us versus them, and now we're like fighting. Whereas if I sing something about my you know, my wife and say that, it's like, well, this is my experience and I'm just sharing it with you, and maybe you picked up on some part of it and added your own story to it, and it's no longer about me and my wife. It's about you and some love that you've experienced. And that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah, I like that part of how things you don't have to beat people over the head with that message.
Right.
And earlier we were talking about, well, you know, you do a lot of social justice work, and then through your music you do social justice, but it's not necessarily something where it's like an adjunct prop where you're like, this is what my message is.
Right.
But but we were talking about and she persisted. So tell me about that song, and she persisted, because that's one of the songs where you do have more of that message, the social justice message, right?
Yeah. So She Persisted, I wrote, it was 2 days after Senator Warren had been silenced on the floor of the Senate by Mitch McConnell. And I don't know, it was also 2016, and I think a lot of us were feeling certain ways, you know, and kind of like feeling like this helplessness. And I ended up being in this songwriting camp. So sometimes you'll get, you know, there's groups or things you can get paired up with, and you basically go and you get paired up with someone you've never met, and you're like, hey, here's 3 hours to write a song. And so I was paired up with this really incredible songwriter out of Sweden. His name is Jens Dornaval. And he and I ended up writing this, you know, this song, She Persisted. And my goal was to fit the words, nevertheless, she persisted, into a song in like a semi-cool way. Because it's a weird phrase. I mean, I think when Mitch McConnell said it, like everybody was like, who says that? who says, nevertheless, she persisted, right? And then it became like this anthem and everybody's wearing their pink hats and like, like became this thing, like she persisted because people were like, yeah, that's what women do throughout history and we'll show you, so anyway, so my goal was to write like something that could be sung like at the Capitol if you're, for like a new anthem, or that you could play at a club. And Jens really helped me. I had the first verse, and then he helped me really take that song and finish it and become what it is today. So. My hands are tied, your hands are too. Now we don't know where to go, don't know what to do. They're feeding lies, starving the truth. Now we don't know where to go, don't know what to do. Can't deny, realize we've been here before. Yeah, history will repeat till we stop that revolving door. They told her to sit down, told her to work hard, told her to stop and wait her turn, told her to shut up, listen. Nevertheless, she persisted. Take us to church, come on, tear us in two. Now we don't know where to go, and we don't know what to do. Dress up the devil in red, white, and blue. Now we don't know where to go, don't know what to do. Can't deny, realize we've been here before. Yeah, history will repeat till we stop that revolving door. They told her to sit down, told her to work hard, told her to stop and wait her turn, told her to shut up, listen. Nevertheless, she persisted.
Ooh, awesome. She persisted.
She persisted.
And when you talk about the not fitting into a particular genre, like I was the first two songs, they sounded like kind of a folksy song. But you were talking about also having like sounds of reggaeton, sounds of cumbia and stuff. And earlier we were talking about when your experience with the Latin Grammys. And you opened for the Latin Grammys, right? And but you told me about the what it was like to actually qualify for Latin Grammys, and
sure.
Did it have to do with the genre? Did it have to do with the language?
Yeah.
So what was that like?
Yeah, I think we were kind of talking about, my music doesn't fit very nicely into a box. Whenever people say like, if I say I'm carrying a guitar around an airport, people are like, oh, you play music, cool. Like, what kind of music do you play? I feel like that's a pretty natural question. And I get it, because it's almost like people want to know the ballpark, right? They're like, I want to know like what category. We like boxes, right? So we're like, oh, I want to know what category to put you in.
Just like the intersectionality.
Right, yeah. They're like, are you
music.
a boy or a girl? It's like, does it really matter? No, but this is what we're taught, right? So like on some level, I think in a lot of ways it's like that's the thing that we like to ask. But honestly, when it comes down to it, if you look at your Spotify playlist, you probably don't care what genre, all these great songs are. And you probably don't care that they come right after each other, that you're hopping probably, decades of music and have all kinds of influences and things that you like. You probably don't care that they come right after each other, right? But that's like the thing that we ask is like, oh, what kind of music do you play? And so it's a hard question for me to answer, because I feel like any label I put on it, just like a label we put on ourselves, is very limiting, So it's like I might say Latin pop, but then I play a song like that, which doesn't nada que ver, right? It's not Latin pop.
Yet you're the same musician who plays
right, and I'll play that I'll play my whole entire set, and people love it because it's so varied. You know what I mean? But it is hard to categorize, and I think like the music industry is very like lane driven. The idea that, I mean, even our radio stations, like you'd have the country station and the, you know, the Tejano station, and like it's hard
Do
because
you get played on the radio?
no. I mean, well, that's a whole other thing. It's
But it has
virtually
to do with
impossible.
the same thing, right?
Yeah, totally. Because I don't
just-
fit into a box nicely. Yeah. Even to have somebody like service radio, they have to understand. They have to basically, you have an album coming out and they're like, okay, we're going to take the hit single and we're going to go shop that. But if I have a single that's She Persisted, but the rest of my album is bilingual, well, where does that fit? Right? So it's just, I think so for the Latin Grammys, and part of the story that we were talking about earlier was that my first, what I would call like my first like major record was with like a really solid sound, is called Uprooted, and it's bilingual. And so it has songs kind of like Sweet Sound that are bilingual in and of themselves. It has some songs in English, it has some songs in Spanish. It's fully bilingual, I like to say. But when I went to go submit that for the Latin Grammys, they rejected it because it wasn't 51% in Spanish. And I learned through like a course of being a member and talking to people, understanding that it's not prescriptive. Like no one's listening to the lyrics and saying, oh, well, the chorus is in Spanish, so therefore it's half the song. Like no one's doing that, right? It's not that. It's more like people are looking at song titles and maybe the title of the record. And so if it doesn't look like on the back, you know, titles, if it doesn't look like it's mostly in Spanish, then they'll be like, oh, okay, well, this doesn't qualify, right? And so when it came around for La Que Manda, which I submitted in 2020, I was like, cool. So I had that experience. So now I'm going to do an all Spanish record.
And you
so
can't
they
argue
can't
the
do that.
51%.
They can't do that to me, you know. But, you know, I think the big point there is that you have to learn the rules to play the game, right? Anything that we're doing in life, like if you're trying to get somewhere, you got to learn the rules to play the game. And so that was part of the rules that I had to learn was like, okay, you know, this is not like clinical exactly how they think of it. And there are committees that listen to the record and decide like, oh, do you fit in this category? And so, and even for me, for La Que Manda, I was like, I'm not exactly sure what genre, but I'm going to go for pop rock because that feels like the most like it. And then it ended up making it through, and you know, we ended up getting a Latin Grammy nom. But I think it was me having had those prior experiences that knew how to like play the game a little better, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And the Grammys, I mean, I'm actually a member of on the board of governors for the Texas chapter, and it's so much more than awards. And that's the other thing I've learned is that like, I think a lot of people get into that thinking like, oh, I want to win a Grammy or I want to like, you know, and then you learn that there's so much more. There's advocacy and there's health organizations and there's education and there's like all these really cool components where we go, you know, fighting for our rights. So I've become a member and I'm now part of the community. And that's the bigger piece is like, yeah, learn the rules to play the game, but also like you're on a team.
Maybe you could start tweaking stuff.
Well, but you're
right?
on a team, you know, and so yeah, it's like now I can help change the conversation to, you know, when we're looking at new genre categories and things like that, I can be part of one of the players, you know.
And I'm actually going to go back to something from earlier, only because it looks like one of the viewers had a question, and this is a very important question.
Dale.
What resources would you recommend for people grappling with their sexuality and their faith?
That's a good question. You know, I don't know that I can point to like specific resources. I mean, a lot of communities do have. I guess it depends on maybe the age of the person, because I do know that there are things like in Austin, there's a program called Out Youth. You know, that would be a great organization to go find. You know, a place where you can hang out and talk to people who are going through similar things. So I would probably look in your community and maybe just do, you know, some kind of LGBTQ resources for that community. Because I think the main thing is finding a community would be a big piece. The other thing I would say is that, you know, if you do have, I think one of the most important things I learned was that coming out to myself and accepting myself, and God was very much part of that process. And I even said the other day, I was like, I came out to God, but like as if God didn't know, right? It's not like God was like, oh, whoa, you're gay. What?
I had no idea.
you know, like, but I think for me, it's more like the idea that it's like getting right with God, right? That was kind of more once I was like, oh, I'm in love with her. It's a beautiful thing. I don't exactly know what to do about it, but like, I know that I'm good. I'm made in the image. I'm beautiful just like any other child of God. Like, I'm not defective. I think that's one of the things that's really hard to wrestle with, is being like, oh, I'm beautifully and wonderfully made. And so I think that once I came to grips with that, I was able to start telling people, because I was like, I don't actually care what they say. If they have a problem with it, it's their problem with God, not mine. And so I think that's the other thing, is that there is a lot of self work that needs to be done. But I would say the other thing is, it's just finding a community, which I know is not an easy thing, especially in a lot of places. Yeah. But maybe there's also online, like if there are, Facebook groups seem so antiquated now, but surely there's like a Discord group. I don't know. Like, there's got to be, yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm glad. Thank you. I'm sure it'll really help our audience member who had that question, and it'll give them more ideas.
Well, and actually, I should say too, I love a good Instagram DM. So if people can feel free to find me on Instagram or Facebook and reach out.
Yeah. So how do we find you on Instagram?
And if you go to GinaChavez.com, it's got all the things, but it's just at Gina Chavez.
Fantastic, Gina Chavez.
Yes.
So how did Gina Chavez come to be the way we know you now? Like, when did you pick up that guitar? When did all this start?
Yeah, well, so I was really fortunate to have great public choir programs. And so I got into choir when I was in 6th grade. And pretty quickly figured out that I was like, oh, I'm pretty good at this. Like, I was able to hear my peers. We all had to sing Amazing Grace, like in front of the entire class, and I was like, oh, like, I'm pretty good at this, And, I think being a young person and finding something that you're good at can be really empowering. And I had great public school choir programs, like hooray for the public arts. And so
keep funding them.
Yes.
Keep funding
them. My God. Amen. Please keep funding them, and just public school in general. And so I learned how to use this instrument first. And then when I went to college, I heard a blues singer. Her name was Toni Price, but she was backed up by 2 guitar players. And for some reason I left that night thinking, I want to do that, but I don't want to wait for a guy to have to play guitar for me. And so my dad had a guitar in the closet. I was like, hey, Dad, don't you have a guitar in the closet? And he pulls out a 1954 Martin that literally was just sitting there. And so I took it to UT when I went to college and saved it from the closet and myself. And, I think I ended up dating a guy who was like a really great songwriter and guitar player. And so I had a level of... He didn't exactly teach me things, but it was like just being around somebody that was like at such a high level. I think I immediately was just like inspired to start messing around and like doing things, even though I didn't really like know what I was doing. Like, I'm not a schooled musician. I don't know like exactly what chords I'm playing and all that kind of stuff, or music theory.
So you're very much self-taught.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, other than choir, but I feel like with choir, you don't exactly have to know how to like read music. Like, we did solfege, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Like, but other than that, it's like, what key are you in? It's like, I don't know. I don't know what key I'm in. I'm on capo 3. I actually liken it to being Catholic. It's like Catholics know the Bible, but we don't know that we know the Bible. Right. So like, we can't quote chapter and verse, but we know the stories.
So it's kind of like learning to cook. People who don't need recipes.
Yeah.
It's just like, I just know.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I just eyeball it.
I know how to put together all these chords.
Yeah.
I listen to all this different music. And what are all the influences that come into play for you?
Yeah. I definitely like cut my teeth on, like Christian, like early kind of like Christian worship songs. That was kind of an early way that I kind of learned the mechanics of singing and playing, and really the power of music, and then Ani DeFranco was definitely, so I like
the folk
learned.
sound,
So
yes.
yeah, so I was like super into Ani DeFranco.
And where did the cumbias and the reggaeton and more of those sounds?
Yeah.
Where did those come in?
Well, so I went to Argentina when I was a junior at UT, and I lived in Buenos Aires. Did not know anything about the country. I literally thought, like, Argentina sounds cool. So like, eat
So
out,
that
right?
was your first time leaving
It
Austin.
was, yeah. First time leaving Austin, Texas, the United States. And all of a sudden I'm like, on a 13-hour plane ride to God knows where. And I literally lived in an apartment on a 7-lane, one-way avenue. Wow. The street was 7 lanes wide. Like I don't even have, in Austin,
And it's
like
just the
we
one
don't,
way.
we don't even have highways that are that wide. Like it's crazy how huge Buenos Aires is. And so I get there and of course like, habla castellano, por favor. And it's like, it's this whole other thing. And so I think with me, like that's kind of where I learned to speak Spanish. And so my Spanish is very weird. Like Hispanohablantes are like, where are you from? Because I have this weird like Tex-Mex meets Argentine Castellano meets like Salvadoran slang. And people are just like, cool, like what is this, But when I was in Argentina, I would say the two things that really influenced me were hearing the voices of Nueva Trova or Nueva Canción. So like Mercedes Sosa, Silvio Rodriguez, Violeta Parra, and what I like to call kind of like the Greenwich Village scene of Latin America, right? The idea that these like really powerful social justice songs, but that had this like Latin flavor, right? That I was like, what is this stuff? And then Chacarrera, let's see. So it's like a 6-count rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 5. And I just kind of became enthralled with that and tried to write my own chacarrera, but ended up writing like a Gina Herrera.
A Gina Herrera.
And I came back with this one song that I wrote like about my time in in Argentina. And that became a song that, I would play my whole set of English music and this one Spanish song in a coffee shop and no one would care. And, like no one's listening. And at a break, somebody would come up and be like, hey, do you have any more of that flamenco stuff? And I'd be like, it's not flamenco. And no, that's actually the only song.
Can we hear it?
Yeah, sure. I'll play a piece of it. It's so simple too. It's like so.
So this is the one you were playing at the coffee shop. Did it make
Yeah.
it into your
Yeah,
Uprooted album?
It's not an Uprooted. It's actually on my very first album, which is called Hanging Spoons, which I think is online. It's like on Spotify
Hanging
and stuff.
Spoons.
Hanging Spoons.
Let's
oh my
hear
god.
that.
But it is the only song off Hanging Spoons that we still play live. Like
Oh.
we have continued. That song has never left the set. People love it. Awesome. Yeah. So I'll just play a piece of it. It's literally 2 chords. And this is like takes you back to, and it's also there's a weird thing that I do with like the measures. So if anybody who's out there who's a musician, you'll notice that there's like a half measure. And again, it's like me not knowing what I was doing, like ended up doing some stuff that's kind of cool, right? That I wouldn't do now probably. Memorias de Argentina inundan mis fantasías a la patria tan extrañada que traiga a mí su mañana. Memorias de Argentina inundan mis fantasías a la patria tan extrañada que traiga mi su mañana. Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, oh, oh. That's kind of it. We do some cool stuff with the rhythm, but like that's it.
So do you just, when you're live, do you just improvise it and just riff into something
No, I mean
different?
we have like a set way to do it, and we have some cool stuff that we do rhythm wise. But like it's a real simple song. Like it's literally just those 2 chords, but it's so fun and gets people into it. But what's funny is that like I was trying to play a chacarrera, but I'm doing more of like a 2 count, like 1, 2, like 1, 2, 1, 2. Like I'm not really like a chacarrera would be. So it's similar, right? but like I didn't know how to play that, right? So I was just like mimicking what they were doing, you know. So it's just interesting. Like I feel like that's kind of my music, because nothing is nada puro, right? So it's like even
all a
even a
mixture.
cumbia, it's like I'm probably not like a puro cumbia, right? A reggaeton, it's like, well, it's got influences, right?
Well, in the one of the reggaeton ones, is it the one from El Salvador that has some of that reggaeton influence?
Yeah, yeah.
Can we hear that one? Can we hear
Yeah.
the story of that one?
Yeah, sure. So my wife and I, before we got married, we did some mission work in El Salvador. It was 2008. The economy was tanking. I had lost my job. She was coming back from a mission year in, actually on Skid Row. She was living out in LA, working on Skid Row, which is like the largest homeless population in the nation, concentrated homeless population. And, you know, she came back, and we had a friend who was from the Catholic Center where we met at UT Austin. And our friend Molly was like, hey, I'm down in Honduras, and I'm teaching girls English with this Catholic volunteer program, and I played them your CD, and they loved it. You should come down and do a concert, haha. And I was like, well, what is she there with? Like, and so we started diving into this program Vides, and I was like, well, what if we go do mission work? Like, I don't have a job. Like, we're not tight, you know, you don't have a job, but let's leave. And so we stopped our lives in Austin and went to El Salvador. We said, send us somewhere Spanish speaking. They sent us to Soyapango, which is essentially a gang dominated part of San Salvador. It's the home of La Mara Salvatrucha, or the MS-13 gang. And we just had an incredible time there. Like, it, of course, is a very dangerous part of San Salvador. And unfortunately, that's largely what we know about El Salvador. And what people don't know is that we are the reason that there are gangs in Central America. We deported gang culture from places like LA. And, you know, children of immigrants who had never been to El Salvador, who grew up in the LA gangs, then got deported to a country that they never knew. And there was a woman at UT Austin. I was a journalism major, and she was a photojournalist who documented the deportation of LA gangs to San Salvador. And this, of course, was in after war-torn El Salvador. And so you have a war-torn country, and you insert gang populations there, and guess what? They take over. And so she actually documented the deportation of gangs, because she had worked there during the war. Anyway, so she was like an incredible resource before we went down to El Salvador. Her name's Donna de Cesare. She has, I just got chills. Like, she has incredible work. And, you know, so here we go down to El Salvador, and like the people are just, I mean, they're incredible. And then the things that we know about El Salvador are it's just so limited. You know, again, talking about labels, it's like people are like, El Salvador, dangerous, right? Like, that's what we know about it. And so I ended up writing this song called Siete De, and it was the story of the song. It's literally it's about a bus, right? So when we got there, we were replacing 2 volunteers, and so one of our volunteers, she said, hey, I'm going to teach you how to use the bus system. You basically just stand on the side of the road, like there's not bus stops, and a bus will come by, you know. And she was like, the Siete De is like the best one, because it'll take you pretty much all the places you want to go. And you also don't really have to wait that long. Like, you literally stand on the side of the road, and like within a couple minutes, like there's a bus. Well, we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And we finally, she was like, this is weird. She was like, let's take a Siete Se and we'll go. Well, the next day we read in the papers that the owners of the bus route, because they're all like privately owned, so there's like people who own the 7D bus line, right? The owners of the route were so upset at the gangs for killing their bus drivers that they shut the route down for a day. And here we are, like, first weekend in El Salvador, and we're like, oh.
I mean, it makes sense, though.
Right?
It's like,
it's, you know, talk about a reality check, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, and then here we are teaching in a school for girls, at a Catholic school with nuns, who literally, like, it was a private school, but like the public schools are really not great there. And so they basically offer like a high quality, low cost education so that people can get like a quality education, right? That women, young girls, can get a quality education. And that's where we were teaching. You know, and this is the world that these girls live in, right? There were days where we would walk outside the compound and there would be a chalk drawing of a young girl who'd been murdered the night before. you know, and it's like, so I wrote this song as, you know, it's a very upbeat song. And it was kind of my like homenaje, like my homage to El Salvador, just kind of saying like, hey, let's get on the Siete Day. We're going to go see the world. It's very like, it's very, you know, like the chorus is, sube, sube la Siete Day, vamos a ver al mundo. Sube, sube la Siete Day, a ver, sube, sube la Siete Day, vamos a ver al mundo. Sube, sube la Siete Day, a ver, a ver. You know, so it's like a very like kind of uplifting song. It's based on like a reggaeton, like ta 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 ta, right? Because when you get on a bus on public
It's
transit,
kind of like it gives you like that little bounce.
Well, when you get on public transit, it's literally old American school buses painted crazy colors and then named like Mano de Dios or Estefany, and you get on there and they're blaring reggaeton music. Like that's public transit in El Salvador. So I was like, well, it's clearly got to be a reggaeton, and. You know, and so I write this song, and it's, you know, here I'm an outsider, like trying to sing something about like great about the country, but it could go any way depending on how people interpret it. And people fell in love with the song. Like if you go read the comments on a couple of the videos that we have for Siete Day, like it's people are like, oh my God, like I can't believe they found something nice to say about El Salvador. This is so cool. Or I used to write the Siete Day, or like I'm from Soyapango, and like you know, people just like fell in love with the song. And then we got to shoot the music video in El Salvador on Siete Day bus.
Talk
and
about
like
representation.
It was so cool.
Awesome.
And so like, and the Siete Day bus drivers like all have the song and they play it on their buses, and they like make fun of the other routes because they don't have like an anthem.
They don't have a song.
They don't have a song. It's so crazy. So it's like it ended up being like turning into this like really beautiful thing. Got this huge coverage, and basically like their version of, you know, like USA Today. It was like a 2-page color spread like about this song, and like it's been really cool.
You put the Siete Day on the map,
right? It's like everyone's like, everybody loves the Siete Day. So yeah.
Okay, so it
well,
looks
actually,
like,
I should say though. So the thing that we came away with, other than the song, and like it's great to have, you know, some connection to El Salvador, but the bigger connection is that we started a college fund for girls in El Salvador.
Okay.
So we have a college fund. My wife and I started Niñas Arriba. And again,
and
if you
can
go,
find this also on your website,
yeah,
right?
if you go to GinaChavez.com, there's a tab that says College Fund, and that'll take you to the Niñas Arriba website. And we've actually done some documentaries that features our students, and we have 5 college graduates. We have 3 other students that are continuing their studies right now. We have a paid internship program. So that's been probably like that's the coolest thing I think I've been a part of.
So going from like being in coffee shops to like then like all these awards and an ambassadorship that you have also with Austin and also with the state, right? So all this stuff that you've accomplished. Could you tell us something about, because I feel like we've talked a lot about your music and the influences, but I want to hear a little bit about your accomplishments. I don't know, you don't seem like someone who brags a lot about herself, but I'd love to hear some of that, because it must be so awesome to go from, I'm just in a coffee shop singing these songs that nobody's paying attention to like the Latin Grammys and all these awards. So
yeah,
share some of that with us.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that one of the big things that's it's actually something that Elizabeth Gilbert talks about, is the idea that, you know, a lot of people talk about like, oh, follow your passion, right? The problem is passion is really finicky, you know, like sometimes you're passionate about this thing and sometimes you're not, you know? And so she talks about following your curiosity. And I think that's something that I innately did well, or especially early on in my career. It was kind of that ignorance is bliss. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was following my curiosity. Like going to El Salvador, everybody was like, why are you doing that? You're finally getting some traction in Austin. You have a band, like you're making waves. Like this is a dumb idea. And I was like, I don't know. I got to go. I got to do it. Like I very much was like listening to my gut and my heart and being like, I don't know why I got to go, you know? And that ended up being like one of the best things, oddly, for my music career, because we started doing these benefit concerts in order to raise money for the college fund. And those became the way that the community really became involved. And I never could have foreseen that. Like I couldn't have laid the groundwork for that. And so I think, I mean, yes, like I have a lot of like really cool experiences and awards, but I think the thing that as a viewer, the thing that I'm proud of is having followed my curiosity. And now I'm at a point where I'm starting to take to be in the driver's seat of my career in a way that before I hadn't been. And so I think that would be the other thing, is that, having goals like winning a Latin Grammy and understanding how to get there and going for it. It's not an accident, right? It's like, no, I'd tried that route, gotten, like my no's and rejections, and I was like, okay, let's try again. Readjust course and go for it.
Awesome.
And then at the same time being like really grateful. Like I literally last night was just in Austin, Texas, and we had the Austin Music Awards. And usually they give you a heads up when you win an Austin Music Award, and they didn't. And so I was like, oh, okay, I guess we didn't win, because we were up for Best Latin. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess we didn't win. I'm literally walking up and they're like, Gina, you're getting an award. And I was like, what? They didn't call me. And they were like, we messed up. It's fine. And so like I walk on stage and I was like, this is really cool. Like, it's really beautiful to like be accepted by your community and to have that kind of recognition, but ultimately I think it's about connecting with people.
Of course. So we have time for one more song.
Yeah.
So, ¿cuál es tu favorita?
All right. Well,
what do we need?
I'm gonna take a swig of water, and then I think we gotta play some cumbia.
Yeah, we definitely have to play some cumbia. So everybody get up.
Although a cumbia
get ready
by
to
myself is a little hard, right? So
yeah, she usually has like a whole band.
yeah,
with her, right?
yeah. So imagine the band. At least imagine the. Okay, that's your part. Yeah, okay, yeah. Oh my God, that'd be awesome. I need to know you're closer than 2,000 miles, so the tips of my fingers miss the curve of your smile. Those dimples make me melt inside, but you, my love, are hard to find. I'm walking the block in the stupor of rage, and I got no more to give than what I've given to date. I need someone to steal my mind, but you, my love, are hard to find. Yeah, you are hard to find. Te quiero, me pierdo si tú no estás aquí. Te extraño, me engaño, para aguantar otro día más. Te añoro, te espero, miles de millas desgasta mi amor. Vuelve, amor. It's colder without your embrace around me. I'm frozen, devout, waiting on bended knee. Your name ignites this heart of mine, but you, my love, are hard to find. Yeah, you are hard to find. Te quiero, me pierdo si tú no estás aquí. Te extraño, me engaño, para aguantar otro día más. Te añoro, te espero, miles de millas desgasta mi amor. Vuelve, amor. Te quiero, me pierdo si tú no estás aquí. Te extraño, me engaño, para aguantar otro día más. Te añoro, te espero, miles de millas desgasta mi amor. Vuelve, amor.
¡Qué hermoso! I'm sorry, I only accompanied you a little at the beginning.
No, it's good. It was good. You had it. You had it though.
But when you do that trumpet sound, that's so cool, because I've heard you do like segunda to the actual trumpet player, and you'll actually do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So awesome. Awesome.
The mouth trumpet.
The mouth trumpet. So I think we have like just a couple of minutes, but we do have a question from one of our viewers who says, many queer folks bond over having had awkward experience at church camp. Does Gina have any stories like that? I think we don't have that much time for a story, but do you have a little story for that?
I mean, I think my awkward experience would be, actually, this is kind of funny. So during this like retreat, right, that I met Jody on, I'm trying to remember, you'd like, everybody's like sleeping on the floor next to each other, like in sleeping bags and stuff. It's, you're all just like in a big room. And I think like, I remember she woke up, we were like laying like face to face, and she woke up. I've never told anyone this. She's going to be like, que vergüenza. She woke up and I was like staring at her. And she was like freaked out. It was like, she was just like, what's happening? And I mean, anyway, there's like lots to our whole story, but yeah.
So there you go, Charles.
I think that's probably the best like church camp story. Because again, like I was of age, like I was already graduated from university, but I was still involved in the university Catholic Center, like even like 2 years after I'd graduated college. So like, I was in like kind of a different place in life. Like I had a job and all that kind of stuff. And so it was kind of different than being like in, high school and you're at church camp and, a girl touches your hand, or I don't know. Like, well, I don't know what happened to you, Charles, but
I know.
Let's talk on Instagram DMs.
So I'm going to break a little bit of the backstage wall because I just wanted to check on what our time is right now. Cinco. Oh, 5
we
minutes.
still got 5 minutes.
Oh, cool.
We got so much time.
We do. Maybe we
Yeah.
have time for another song.
Oh, another song.
Yeah, something short, I
Something
guess.
cortito.
Yeah, something fun.
Something fun.
Algo para las mujeres for
Oh.
International Women's Day.
All right, I like
Women's
that.
Month.
So one of the interesting things is I don't typically have like an English language version of a song and a Spanish language version, but
you do for this?
So She Persisted. I wanted that, like a song that was kind of like that, like a This Is for Women song, but I wanted it for Latinas, and so I ended up writing this song called Ella. Excuse me. I ended up writing this song called Ella, and it's a very different song, but lyrically, there's a lot of similarities, right? So it starts off like in She Persisted, it's like, my hands are tied, your hands are too. Now we don't know where to go, don't know what to do. Well, the first part of this song is, sus manos están atadas. Her hands are tied. Su voz no puede más, no sabe a dónde ir, ni qué hacer. Su cuerpo no para de bailar al ritmo de esta realidad. No sabe a dónde ir ni qué hacer. Le quitaron las ganas de hablar, el silencio tratan de comprar. A la fuerza ellos quieren callar. En contra de esto y más, nunca se rindió. Nunca se rindió. Toda la historia, callando una verdad, hemos tenido el poder. Siempre supimos a dónde ir y qué hacer. Le quitaron las ganas de hablar, el silencio tratan de comprar. A la fuerza ellos quieren callar. En contra de esto y más, nunca se rindió. Nunca se rindió. Nunca se rindió. Nunca se rindió. En la calle corremos peligro. En la casa nos matan también. Y si armamos valor para decirlo, hasta la iglesia se calla también. Pero no tenemos tiempo que perder. Fueron muchas las que lucharon ayer, por las que están y las que vendrán. No nos rendimos, ella persistió. Nunca se rindió. No nos rendimos, ella persistió. Se rindió, no nos rendimos, ella persistió, no nos rendimos, nunca se rindió, no nos rendimos, ella persistió, no nos rendimos, no nos rendimos.
Beautiful, very beautiful. Oh
So
my
they're
gosh.
like primas.
Awesome,
Those
primas.
canciones. Yeah.
Okay, primas
Yeah.
canciones
Primas
en
ca-
inglés y
yeah.
español.
There you go.
Oh my gosh, Gina Chavez. This was such a pleasure. I'm a big fan. I'm a huge
thank you.
fan, and just remember, folks, to go to your website, which is
GinaChavez.com.
GinaChavez.com, so that you can find all the information that you need on Gina Chavez, her tour dates, and thank you so much for joining us at the Musco Online.
Yes.
Y amigos, remember that we have more kicking off pretty soon. We've got a Ballet Folklorico Fest that actually I'm going to be hosting as well. So on Saturday at 6 p.m., that'll be the first one. So check us out again. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And a shameless plug, I've actually
Yes,
got a solo show tomorrow in La Jolla. So if anybody's in the area, y'all should come check it out. So,
All right.
yeah. Yeah. And I've also got some, so like that song, I'm really proud. We put out a music video featuring women from around the world dancing in their home spaces because the rise of domestic violence during the pandemic was so huge. And so that song in particular, I wanted to kind of bring awareness to domestic violence against women and survivors. And so it's a really cool video. You can watch women filming themselves dancing in their own home spaces and from people around the world as a way of kind of reclaiming the domestic space for survivors of domestic violence.
All right.
So,
Muchas gracias.
yeah.
Muchas gracias, Gina. And anything else, folks? We're good.
Thank y'all so
All right.
much.
Remember, Saturday, 6 p.m., Ballet Folklorico Fest. And thank you.
Thank you so
Bye. Adios.
Adios.
¿Quién manda? Ella manda. ¿Quién manda? Ella manda. ¿Quién manda? Ella manda. Si alguien te pregunta, di que yo soy la que manda. Solo hago lo que quiero, no lo que pienso que debo. Cuando miro al espejo, me gusta todo lo que veo. Antes me hacía pequeña, antes escondía mis fuerzas, antes enterraba mis sueños y ahora no hay tiempo para dudar. ¿Quién soy? Yo soy la que manda. ¿Quién soy? Yo soy la que manda. ¿Quién soy? Yo soy la que manda. Si alguien te pregunta, di que yo soy la que manda. ¿Quién manda? Ella manda. ¿Quién manda? Ella manda. ¿Quién manda? Ella manda. Si alguien te pregunta, di que yo soy la que manda. Solo digo lo que pienso, no me importa tu opinión. Cuando cantas desde el pecho, ¿Quién manda? Ella manda. ¿Quién manda? Ella manda. ¿Quién manda? Ella manda. Si alguien te pregunta, di que soy la que manda. Ya camino a donde quiero y a mi propio ritmo voy. Si vienes bien, si no también soy feliz con lo que soy. Solía compararme con otros, solía temer las consecuencias, solía no creer en mí misma. Ahora soy un fuego abrasador. ¿Quién soy? Yo soy la que manda. ¿Quién soy? Yo soy la que manda. ¿Quién soy? Yo soy la que manda. Si alguien te pregunta de que soy la que manda. ¿Quién soy? Yo soy la que manda. ¿Quién soy? Yo soy la que manda. ¿Quién soy? Yo soy la que manda.